This is a WKYT podcast.
Good morning again and welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers. I'm Bill Bryant and we're certainly glad you're with us. Hope you're enjoying your weekend. Despite the pandemic, home sales have remained strong in Lexington and the surrounding region. And Realtors indicate that they're listing and showing homes at a good pace even as the holidays approach. But there are issues and challenges for the housing market, to be sure. Inventory is low in popular price ranges. By the time you spot a sign, that house may have multiple offers on it. Gentrification is an issue in many of our cities and towns where investors buy up and improve property. Sometimes it displaces longtime residents or it causes the tax bills to jump so folks can't afford to be there. Is buying or selling a home during the holidays a good idea? Lots to get updated on today with Justin Landon, who is CEO of the Lexington Bluegrass Association of Realtors, LBAR, and Greg Buchanan, the 2020 president of LBAR. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us. We really do appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill.
Always a pleasure, Bill.
Landon, Justin, the indicators say that we are in an economic downturn right now. We know we're in the middle of this pandemic. We see these numbers getting worse and more concerning. And yet the numbers also show us that people in central and southern Kentucky are still buying homes, right?
Yeah, no, we've been very blessed in the real estate industry during the pandemic. In fact, real estate has been one of the absolute shining lights of our economy nationwide, particularly here in central Kentucky. We have seen a booming real estate market really every month since around June. You know, we experienced the slowdown that everybody kind of expected in March, April, and May. But we've been year over year ahead of numbers from 2020 over 2019 ever since. And in fact, in the month of October, we were up 18% in total sales, and median house prices up 12%. It's hard to really nail down what's causing that, except that interest rates are at an all-time low, and inventory is at an all-time low. And when you have those two things, you just have way more demand than you have supply, and that's leading to a lot of sales and record prices. It's just, that's 2020 for you.
Greg, has this very unusual year with this pandemic, with a lot of people working from home and spending more time there, caused a lot of people to really think about where they live and whether it provides what they need, and maybe they're ready to make that move, and that could be part of what's driving things?
There's no doubt about some of that. We saw a lot of people wanting in-ground pools at the beginning of the pandemic. They were looking for houses for certain things like that they couldn't find, out in town where all the pools were closed. Obviously, home offices became hugely popular. Just more space, I think, if you have multiple families with multiple kids and having them spaced out because they're having to do their schoolwork from the virtual learning way of doing things. So I think that had some play to do with it, but mostly I think it's just the interest rates and it's almost free money out there. So people are taking advantage of it. And prior to the pandemic, we had unemployment rate was at an all-time low for the most part. And so that gives the people more purchasing power.
And yet,
and the National Association of Realtors actually released a study about a month ago that said that the number one housing inventory that the average American wanted most was a single family detached with a small yard. And already just in the 6 months of the pandemic, that desired inventory has become a single family detached home with a large yard. I mean, that's a small change, but to see really aggregate data in demand change that quickly, I think is a huge indication of what the pandemic has done to drive people's desires. And
that's very interesting because, developments are what they are, right? And so if they were responding to the market even a couple of years ago, they would have been building something different or sizing those lots differently then, based on that, right?
That's right.
As we look at this, and we know that one of the major issues here in central Kentucky, and especially in Lexington, is an inventory issue. There is a shortage of homes on the market. Talk to us a little bit about that and give us an update on where that is. Justin?
Greg, you want to go ahead and take a shot at that?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the inventory remains extremely low, and we have, some of it is obviously through the supply and demand chain. We have very, very little supply. We have huge demand, like I said, because the interest rates are so low. And some of it's self-inflicted. I mean, we have not really taken a real effort to look at the urban service boundary and what kind of effect that has caused on our housing prices. We're going to go into 2021 with probably the lowest of inventory of all time. What that's going to do is going to put an immense amount of pressure on housing in central Kentucky, specifically Lexington, and it's going to make the housing prices skyrocket. You're already seeing some of that effect in Scott County, in Madison County. I mean, Scott County has taken kind of the brunt of Lexington not being able to figure out how to navigate the inventory issue. And Madison County has done a fantastic job of taking on a lot more, but those can't last forever. Scott County cannot sustain the growth that they've been sustaining the last 2 or 3 years. Neither can Madison County. So where do we go next, Bill? That's the big question. Is it Clark County? Is there going to be a regional discussion to figure out our growth problem? We have not only a growth problem in residential real estate, we have a massive growth problem in commercial land that's available. I'd be interested to hear from Bob Quick on Chamber of Commerce, which we sit on the board at. How many companies have tried to find land here to build on to bring new jobs to Lexington? How many have they had to turn away? So there's definitely some interesting discussions that I think leaders in the community, and we would definitely want to be a part of that discussion, that we need to come together and figure some things out.
When you talk about prices, I think that's the average Lexingtonian, the average Central Kentuckian. What they're seeing is rapidly escalating home prices. I remember when I first came here to Lexington, my first year, home prices in Fayette County increased by 8% year over year. And I felt like my hair was going to catch on fire because, as somebody who watches real estate markets across the country, 8% growth is not sustainable, right? I mean, that's a crazy rate of growth, and wages aren't keeping up with it. This year, not just for Fayette County, but for the entire Central Kentucky market, we're expecting a 10% price increase year over year. And what that does to housing affordability here in Central Kentucky is very real. And I think if cities like Boulder, Colorado, or Portland, Oregon, or Raleigh, North Carolina could have been having these conversations 10 years ago, they would have, right? We're kind of starting to ring the bell and say, we need to have a conversation about making sure that our market remains affordable, because that's what makes us such a competitive marketplace for businesses and for people who want to have a great quality of life.
And yet, and Greg, you've been around here all of your life, and certainly, Justin, you've become immersed in the community in the last few years, and so that the pushback to that all of these years has been, well, this is a special place, and in order to keep it that way, you have to have the green space, you have to have the horse farms, you cannot turn those over and till ground and create subdivisions everywhere. What do you say when you hear people make that argument?
Well, I say that I completely agree with them. I agree that we need to keep the horse farms protected, but the fact is that not all there is land outside the urban service boundary that is not agriculturally significant for horse farms, and so we need to take a look at that land that's outside the urban service boundary that fits the need of both sides, right? So we completely agree. We don't want to tear up the horse farms by no means. That's what does make this place special. But there is land out there that we could probably have some pure discussion on to alleviate some of this self-inflicted inventory issues. Where, like I said, prices will continue to skyrocket. We have more than 50% of our workforce lives outside of Fayette County. How many police cars do you see in Madison County, Bill, whenever you're driving up to work almost every day? There's a lot of pressure on the inventory, and I think we can at least have some reasonable discussion. It shouldn't be an end-all, be-all, but it should be a reasonable discussion on how we can figure this out.
And it doesn't have to be a discussion around, doesn't have to solely be a discussion around, new land outside the urban service boundary being released. It can also be a full regional conversation where we really bring in the counties that surround Fayette County and really have an open and frank conversation about how we grow as a community. Right? This is not a solution that any one county should bear. It's something that we as a full Central Kentucky community really need to have a conversation about. And I think that as we look at what's happening with prices, what's happening with inventory levels, right now we have 1,919 listings for sale in the MLS. We had 3,800 in January of this year. right? I mean,
Wow.
the available housing is just in incredibly short supply, and that's going to force these conversations sooner rather than later, we think.
Well, there are other thorny issues, and let's talk about a couple of those right now. For instance, gentrification, an issue in some neighborhoods where investors come in, flip properties, improve their value. Sometimes that displaces people who did live there or causes property values to go up, the tax jumps, and people who live there can't afford to be there anymore. How is that being addressed when realtors get together for discussions and professional development and talk about what is the right way to grow?
You know, gentrification is a really tough conversation, particularly because it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. You know, what happens is in inner city neighborhoods where prices begin to appreciate, you start to see gentrification happening, right? I think what we as a real estate community would really like to see is people who do own homes in those areas to make sure that they're reaching out to somebody who's going to make sure that if they do want to sell their house, that they're going to get their highest and best price. We see a lot of properties often in neighborhoods that are in that flipping mentality where they're going to get bought, renovated, and flipped. You know, those homes are not often sold, not often, sometimes they're not sold, you know, using a realtor. You know, they're sold, you know, direct to investors. And that doesn't always lead to, you know, them getting the best price. You know, I would absolutely encourage anybody in one of those neighborhoods to contact a realtor. They're going to give you a competitive price analysis. They're going to make sure that you get the highest and best value for your home. You know, I think when it comes to gentrification, we don't ever want to say that somebody shouldn't be able to sell their house and get a great price for it. But we just want to make sure that that they're protecting, you know, their greatest asset, which is their home. As we talk about, you know, home ownership gaps in communities, you know, we as an association under Greg's leadership have really taken some steps this year to start talking more about diversity and inclusion within our membership. Not only do we know that there's home ownership gaps among communities of color, we also know that there aren't nearly enough real estate professionals of color, right? We don't have enough real estate professionals from traditionally underrepresented homeowners. And so we're making some efforts this year by standing up a diversity and inclusion committee to really start to look at how we get more people from traditionally underrepresented homeowner groups involved in the industry and really try to close those gaps.
And Greg, I want to pick up there and ask you a little bit about that, because there are things that you're doing, like having a more welcoming atmosphere, certainly. You're talking about that, but sometimes the discussion when it comes to racial equality and justice issues, there are things that are very concrete. Some terms used in ads and approaches to the way realtors do business has changed. The term master bedroom is no longer used by most in professional real estate, right?
That's correct. The National Association of Realtors put out a few changes like that, and you know, getting off of the term master suite and calling it, you know, I believe it's primary bedroom is what it's called now. So yeah, there are definitely some things like that. And you know, to piggyback on what Justin said about the you know, the racial gaps of communities of color, you know, we feel like you know, home ownership builds communities, and when, you know, people have a stake in the neighborhood, then, you know, you tend to see people care a little bit more. And so to have that gap kind of come together is going to be good for everyone in Lexington and the surrounding counties as well.
Well, people would sometimes say you're going to talk about homes, and then all of a sudden you find out there are all these controversial issues and other real topics to be discussed in this realm. So it is quite interesting. But we are approaching the holidays. Colder weather months are moving in. Conventional wisdom might be that it is not an ideal time to move, and yet we see these signs keep popping up. And are transactions going to stay strong right into the winter?
They're going to stay strong right into the winter, and they're going to remain strong in 2021. I'm really bullish on the real estate market. I think that you know, a lot of people were worried about the election and whatnot, but I believe the investor market was priced in for a Biden win maybe 2 weeks prior to the election. We're not seeing it affect real estate at all. We expect 2021 to be even a bigger year than 2020. Which is hard to fathom, but we feel like that's the strength of it. And I do feel like if there is some sort of downward trend in the marketplace with regards to the stock market, that real estate may be the best and safest investment. You know, we didn't see the real estate market crash during COVID, and like the stock market did. So I do think that real estate's going to be a safe place. There's so much money sitting on the sidelines, Bill, as we talked before. People waiting to park that money somewhere, and 2021 is going to be another good year.
Justin, how often are people right-sizing when they make the decision about their living space, either buying more room to spread out and grow or less to take care of?
Yeah, I think the conversations of all home buyers are having is whether to downsize, upsize, or right-size. And I think really regardless of what position somebody finds themselves in right now, this is a pretty tremendous time to sell your house. Now, full disclosure, it's not the easiest time to find exactly what you're looking for, but in terms of getting top dollar for your home, particularly for somebody looking to downsize, this is an amazing time to list your home for sale. As I said, we've got something like just under 2,000 listings for sale in a marketplace that could easily handle double that number of properties for sale.
All right.
So if you're looking to make a decision about where you want to live in the future, call your realtor today. There really is never going to be a better time.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us. We'll have you back again as maybe the spring approaches, and we'll see how we get through this winter. We really appreciate it, the folks from LBAR, the Association of Realtors. And we'll be back on Kentucky Newsmakers in a moment. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers. So what kind of winter are we facing? WKYT Chief Meteorologist Chris Bailey recently unveiled his winter weather prediction, and some of its attention getting. In fact, as we head into this coming week, it may be playing out. Every year we like to take a closer look at the predictions just as we get ready to head into December. And so Chris is with us. Good to see you.
Good to see you, my brother. How you been?
It's
long
been
time no see for us.
Exactly. It's been a year, hasn't it?
It has been. It has been.
And despite that, in such a troubling year, it's been pretty classic every season. It was a beautiful spring.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
We had a warm summer, a nice fall. So as winter approaches, what are we generally expecting in Kentucky?
When you look back at this year, and especially this fall, Bill, it's been as pretty of a fall as I can remember around here. So let me show you the ingredients that we put together when we make that winter forecast, because the apparent weather of the year plays a big role in this. And if you look back so far at 2020, as wild as everything else in the world has been, the weather, as Bill just said, has been fairly tranquil. But you know what, Bill? Every month this year has been the polar opposite of what we've experienced for the past 4 or 5 years. If you remember last November, it snowed on multiple days. We had more snow in November of last year than we did the entire winter. We hit December of 2019 and everything just turned snowless and mild. This year, it's been the opposite. It hasn't snowed yet in November. I think we changed that into Monday and then into Tuesday. And then also look at the global indicators that you and I often talk about when we do this every November. When we break down that winter forecast, we talk about what's going on in the Pacific because, Bill, that's the biggest, baddest body of water on the planet, and we are downstream from that. So what goes on there impacts the weather here in Kentucky, as crazy as that sounds. So you've got a La Nina going on, which is cooler than normal waters, and that big pool of warm water that is up in the Gulf of Alaska and off the west coast. And Bill, a lot of times those two will argue for big ups and downs in the temperature department across Kentucky and the eastern part of the country.
And you almost prefer an argument and going one way or the other, overriding that line that can be so tough. Right around the freezing mark is when we tend to have issues.
That it is. And if you look back over the past 5 years, you can't really recall one storm where we had that. We are long overdue for one of those fence riders. Where you get that 32-degree line to set up on the Kentucky River down here, and then everybody thinks, oh, it must be the river. It's raining in Richmond and snowing or icing in Lexington, like we saw in the big ice storm of 2003. But you know what? This year, I think we got a chance of seeing something similar to that fence rider. Let me show you this here real quickly, and you get an idea about this. So we've got that warm pool of water, and I said that, Bill, will sometimes give you an active southern jet stream. So one of those tracks for the storm systems, look at this, coming right over Kentucky, and that would be your fence rider that you just talked about. So you can get heavy rain, you can get a mixed bag of winter weather that can produce ice, snow, heavy rain. We haven't seen that in a couple of years.
Yeah, I know you like to look back when years remind you of other years. Do you see one that this brings to mind?
I do, and one of those years is 2010. I've got several years that have had a southern track like the one you're seeing here, that also you may see this coming up Monday and Tuesday of this week. A track that is similar to this one, which was the second storm track for the winter. So what this does, Bill, is that it essentially, I think, puts Kentucky within that near normal window of opportunity for the temperatures around here. So much warmer than normal across the south, colder than normal to the northwest. So all of that together means, I think, here in Lexington, central and eastern Kentucky, we're close to average. We may be a degree or two colder or just a degree or two better than that. But you know, with an active storm track, Bill, I think snowfall actually averages above normal. Doesn't matter if the temperature is a little colder than normal or a little warmer than normal. I think we get plenty of systems to come through here that can drop a few of those 4+ inch snowstorms that we have not seen in several years, as a matter of fact. But there you go with the analog years. So you look at those years. 2017, 13, I've got 2010 in there, then I've got a few from the 2000s, including 07, 05, 2000. I cut them off at 1970 because really, as you start to go back beyond that, you don't find a whole lot in common with the weather patterns we're seeing now.
Interesting, yeah. You know, COVID-19 has affected everything, and even the state and local road crews are telling us, you know, have some patience if we have some of those snows and icy situations. And people will be out there. You do have fewer people on the move, but you know, you will have some out there. So that's something we'll have to watch for as well.
It is. So you, as you said, you just got to exercise a little more patience. But you know, Bill, with 2020 being what it is and the kids at home, these kids are going to be robbed of snow days too, or the excitement that comes along maybe with a snow day. Because you know what, NTI doesn't care about a snow day. Doesn't care if there's, you know, rain or snow outside.
But there's still recess, right?
There is still recess, and they still love their snow. Trust me. Just check my Twitter feed on that one right now.
There's no doubt about that. Folks can check out your full winter forecast on WKYT.com. Fun as always, and we'll see how it goes, Chris.
That's right, Bill.
Thank you.
You bet.
Stay with us. We'll be back on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers with a special story in just a moment. Welcome back, and before we go here on Kentucky Newsmakers, you know, every day we hear the new numbers of people with coronavirus. It's easy to forget that there is a person with each number. Jeff and Meredith Willett of Lexington are two of those people. Doctors gave him little chance of surviving. Our Sam Dick brings us their story.
Life was just fabulous and normal and all that it could be for us, really, in 1 week.
All hell broke loose.
Yeah, it was.
They finish each other's thoughts. Jeff and Meredith Willett, married 17 years, have survived a nightmare that began in August.
And I had what was a terrible cough and cold.
Meredith caught the virus first.
Headache.
She got feeling better, so I thought maybe that might be the turn I would take.
But Jeff, who they think got it from her, went downhill fast.
You were getting worse by the minute, and I'm truly sorry I didn't take you to the hospital sooner.
Jeff was admitted to Baptist Health on August 25th.
Leaving you was the hardest thing I had ever done, but they would not let me come into the hospital at all. I did wonder if it would be the last time I would ever see you again.
Meredith kept a journal documenting every procedure, every doctor and nurse involved, and her emotions at the time.
August the 26th, Wednesday, third day. By 11 p.m., they had decided to put you on a ventilator. You called me, so scared, just in a whisper.
Jeff was on a ventilator for almost 3 weeks, unable to communicate with her. She wasn't allowed at his bedside, so the nurses would hold up an iPad near him.
And I would cheer him on, and even let the dogs bark so that he could possibly, even potentially, if he could hear, you know, that would make me feel better that he knows that we're here, cheering him on.
He was transferred to UK, still on a ventilator, and she asked his doctor for a prognosis.
He just shook his head. He asked me if you had a directive. He asked me if he is to have a heart attack, do you want us to resuscitate? He told me to consider your injuries in your lung and your kidneys. Oh my God, this is really happening. I was at work in my office crying my eyes out, and I wondered how could I live the rest of my life without you.
Meredith wrote about the medical staffs at both hospitals giving Jeff loving care.
Jill washed your face and cleaned you up. I was so humble and incredibly thankful for such a sweet nurse who could take care of you because I couldn't do a thing sitting here at home.
Finally, on the 19th day on the ventilator, Jeff showed improvement and slowly began to wake up, and Meredith was allowed at his bedside.
I put my hands around you the best that I could with all the tubes and the cords, and I dropped my head to your chest, and I cried and cried. And when I looked at you, I asked you, do you know who I am? And you answered, my wife, in a little whisper and scratchy voice. There are no words to how I felt that moment. You were going to make it.
The Willets credit prayers for Jeff's survival. They agreed to tell their story to educate people.
To take it seriously, it really is a serious virus and with devastating effects.
Jeff was released from Cardinal Hill Rehabilitation Hospital on October 20th, but his stay at home was only 5 days. COVID-19 had attacked his heart. He underwent open heart quadruple bypass surgery for 5 blockages. He is now back home again, but still battling weak lungs and kidneys. We wish him continued progress. Certainly it has been a struggle, but at this point, a struggle and survival. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Kentucky Newsmakers. We'll see you bright and early this week on WKYT This Morning. Make it a good week ahead.